Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. Clemson and more. All right, last kind of big picture thing, then I want to do some quick small stuff and then get to Auburn basketball. I do got to talk about Penn State football. I've largely avoided it so far because I just think, I just kept saying, they'll figure it out, they'll figure it out, they'll figure it out. I trust James Franklin, which I know a lot of Penn State fans listening are going to say, you're crazy, you suck, you don't know what you're talking about. You trust James Franklin. But I do trust James Franklin. But after watching Saturday, playing Iowa, Iowa did whatever they wanted. I don't think Iowa's a bad team by any stretch, by the way. Watching the Iowa game, it's really bad. But I have given James Franklin the benefit of the doubt. But I do think you got to talk about it, right? I mean, they're 0-5, first time in school history that they're 0-5. And to me, I think a lot of Penn State fans think it's a big indictment on James Franklin. He's been overrated the whole time. You know what I think it is? I think it's an indictment on the biggest problem James Franklin has had, which is rearing its head this year, which is the lack of ability to develop a star quarterback. No different, by the way, than Georgia, Michigan, Tennessee, on and on and on and on and on. But I think it's rearing its ugly head, and I think because of opt-outs, because of injuries, because of stuff like that, it's made worse at Penn State because the surrounding cast is not there the way that it once was. And so when I look at Penn State, it's kind of crazy, right? Because every fan base has its lunatics and craziness and all that stuff. But Penn State fans weirdly do not trust James Franklin at all. And I can't say that I really get it, right? I think overall, he's actually been pretty good as a head coach. You look at his overall track record, first of all, last 4 years, 11-3 last year, 11-2 the year before, 9-4 and 11-2. I take that back. It was 11-2 last year, 9-4 the year before, 11-2, 11-3. He is largely the only coach in the Big Ten that has given Ohio State any problems at all. Obviously, beat Ohio State, in 2016. The 2017 game was decided by 1 point. The 2018 game was decided by 1 point. Last 2 years have been competitive, but not as close. But, you're talking about 3 straight years where you beat them, you lose by 1, you lose by 1. And so, I don't really understand why Penn State fans hate James Franklin that much. Other than that, obviously, I get the goal at a school like Penn State is you got to win a national championship, got to get to the playoff. Penn State was really close. They haven't gotten there yet. But apparently there's a lot of Penn State fans that do not trust James Franklin. And so when I look at this team specifically, I think it comes back down to what I said a minute ago. I think it's his inability to develop a quarterback. And what's crazy is, and I've talked about this with a lot of other people, is he's basically recruited really well and been able to develop everything else. I looked up the recruiting rankings just to make sure I'm not going crazy. In 2020, Penn State had the 15th ranked recruiting class. 2019, they had the 12th ranked recruiting class. 2018, they had the 6th ranked recruiting class. 2017, they had the 15th ranked recruiting class. Now, recruiting experts will tell you there's a big gap between, say, 1, 2, 3, Alabama, Ohio State, maybe Georgia, and even 7, 8, 9. But when you're talking about 4 top 15 classes in the last 4 years, you got a lot of talent in your program. The problem is, again, at the quarterback position. Before this year, this year it was Sean Clifford. Last year it was Sean Clifford. But before Sean Clifford was a kid named Trace McSorley. Really good college quarterback. As best I could tell, I don't believe he's playing in the NFL right now. But he kind of was who he was as a college quarterback. He won you a lot of games, but when you had to go ahead and put a team on your back, and I guess, by the way, he's on the practice squad for the Baltimore Ravens, who knew, 6th-round pick, Trace McSorley. When you talk about Penn State, been a really good team, had a really good college quarterback, and beat the teams they were supposed to. They beat Maryland and Rutgers, and some years they beat Michigan, and some years Michigan beats them, and some years they beat Wisconsin, and some years Wisconsin beats them. They beat Iowa up until Saturday. But what I think Penn State is a metaphor of is something that I talk about a lot on this show, and for people who listen to it regularly, you've heard me make this rant, and I've talked about it specifically with Georgia. I believe college football is getting to the point where it is essentially like the NFL. It is now a quarterback-driven sport. And what do I mean by that? You look at the teams that are competing religiously for college football playoff berths, what do they got in common? They got NFL-caliber quarterbacks leading them on their roster. Clemson, the last 2 years, and this year, of course, Trevor Lawrence. Before him, Deshaun Watson. Alabama, Tua. Oklahoma, Kyler Murray. Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield, 2 number 1 overall picks, and a guy in Jalen Hurts who probably should be starting because Carson Wentz is terrible, but neither here nor there. Joe Burrow last year. I mentioned Tua, but then you mentioned the teams that get to the playoff that can't compete at that level. You're talking about a Notre Dame team that got blown out a few years ago with Ian Book, who just isn't an NFL-caliber quarterback. Michigan State, the year that they got to the college football playoff, did not have an NFL-caliber quarterback. Washington, a few years ago, got to the college football playoff, did not have an NFL-caliber quarterback, and it doesn't matter how good the personnel is around them, you just can't win. And so that's kind of my issue with Penn State, is for years they've had a really good college quarterback. They've taken care of the teams that they're supposed to, but when you're going against a Dwayne Haskins, when you're going against a Justin Fields, when you're going against those kinds of teams, you just don't have the dude to go throw for throw, score for score. But the problem is everywhere else is good enough. It's just not good enough when you play the elite of the elite in college football. And to take it a step further, the reason I think why I bring all this up is because I think it's crystallizing itself this year. If I had to give you one thesis for what's going on, I would say that overall, I think it's very simply that in years past, the talent outside of the quarterback position was good enough to get by an Iowa, to get by an Indiana, to get by a Maryland, and now it's not. And that's not, some of it's not James Franklin's fault. Their leading rusher from last year, Journey Brown, had to medically retire from football because of a very scary heart ailment that wasn't related to COVID, thank goodness. Their backup running back, Noah Cain, second leading rusher, hurt, out for the season. Their best defensive player, Micah Parsons, out for the season. And so when you take out a team's 2 best rushers, a top 10 pick on the defensive side of the ball, all of a sudden you need a little bit more out of the quarterback, and you're not going to get it. And so for a Penn State fan who's maybe listening to this show for the first time, I want to make one thing abundantly clear. I'm not saying James Franklin takes no accountability for this at all. Because at the very least, you got to blame them like we do with Jeremy Pruitt, with Kirby Smart, with Jim Harbaugh for not being able to develop a quarterback. And for whatever reason, there's just not enough depth at the other positions this specific year. But if I had to, again, do an overarching what is wrong with this program, why is it the way that it is, I would just say you've had really good college quarterbacks, but not an NFL star type quarterback. And you've gotten the results of what a really good college quarterback will give you if you don't have that guy. I'll be curious. I don't know what the answer is, how you get that guy. I don't know if you change the coordinator. I mean, obviously, they had their most success when Joe Moorhead, the former Mississippi State coordinator, was their